The controversial MVP voter who put Lamar Jackson fourth on his ballot defended his decision. We talk about what he had to say about it, some final Super Bowl takeaways for the Ravens, and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We are here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day as well. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. In audio form, you can follow along and subscribe. We are a 5-day-week Ravens show, even in the offseason. In-season content, off-season content, 5 days a week, each and every single week for you. News, analysis, updates, the whole 9 yards. Here with us today, Taco Tuesday, it is Qadry Ismail, former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion. And Q, we know the Eagles, they got the job done against Kansas City, and that's putting it nicely. The Eagles looked like they were the only team that belonged out on that field on Sunday. They are the Super Bowl champions. The Chiefs do not get the three-peat. You and I haven't had a chance yet to talk about the MVP race, which ended with a Josh Allen win. Lamar Jackson finishes in second. So much happens during Super Bowl week, and I know you and I talked about like how crazy of an event that is with all the media and all the events that go on before the game. But now for the Ravens, we can move ahead, look ahead, and discuss how this team is going to get over the hump next year.
Yeah, I think just looking at the culmination of the season, obviously with the Super Bowl and the way we saw the MVP balloting kind of come out and unfold. I know we are going to get into that, but the Super Bowl was really interesting. I thought that Robert Gronkowski mentioned in Tampa when they won their Super Bowl there, he and Tom Brady, that Patrick Mahomes was under duress the entire time in Tampa and was unable to really get into a good, strong rhythm. And because of that, they wound up losing the Super Bowl. Again, you look at what they've done this year. They've been in so many tight, close games, and they've been able to, do what they needed to do to win it, clearly getting to the Super Bowl. But this was interesting. This was, that blueprint of we're going to get after Tom Brady. Get after Patrick Mahomes. But the way in which they got after him without necessarily having to bring extra guys and play pretty much a zone look on the back end while just rushing 4 guys. I mean, that was just Vic Fangio's, opus. Like from that point forward, you can't get any better. You might as well just go ahead and retire, Vic. But he did a great job of game planning, and the talent across the board just did an amazing job of pressuring Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs offense. They had zero rhythm. I think it was deep into the third quarter when they finally crossed over the 50-yard line. That was as complete of a performance that I've seen in quite a while, which brings me back to the Ravens and saying, again, from a Myles Garrett aspect of things, that's why you go and get a guy like a Myles Garrett. Are you probably going to get him because he's in your division and general manager doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of his owner if, in fact, Myles gets traded to your division opponent? No, you probably are not. It's probably highly improbable. But to talk about it, yeah, that's the reason why. What we saw against Patrick Mahomes, that Eagles defensive front, was just dominating. And for a Myles Garrett, a guy like him that will command double teams, that will command game planning, that will free up other guys, like that is just a pure luxury that you would love to have.
Yeah, we'll get to it in the second part of the show because I think that the pass rush equation for Philly and what they did show against the Chiefs, the Ravens have to emulate at least some of that. We'll talk about how that happens. And then with the Myles Garrett conversation in the final part of the show, there's another name, another star in that pass rushing department that maybe could be available, maybe not. But we'll talk about if that could be an option for the Ravens, if that is a path that the team who has him wants to take. But Q, MVP conversation wise, we're all kind of just putting a bow on it. Josh Allen won the award, and obviously Lamar Jackson finishes in second place. There was a super tight race, and we now know who voted for who put Lamar where on the ballot, who put Josh Allen where on the ballot. A lot of first places for Lamar, second place for Allen. A lot of first place for Allen, second place for Lamar. There was one person who put Allen in third, and there was one person who put Lamar in fourth. And that person who put Lamar in fourth was a former NFL quarterback in Jim Miller, who played for the Steelers, played for the Bears, and has a show on Sirius XM radio called Moving the Chains. And a lot of people, after the ballots were released, were just like, how can you put Lamar? I mean, just public outcry. Again, not it being that Josh won the award. That to me is not the issue in this whole thing. Josh had a great season, and we all acknowledge that. So did Lamar. But seeing what Lamar did in putting him fourth on the ballot seems like a very big stretch to me, considering how impactful Lamar was this season. Now, Jim Miller's ballot was Josh Allen 1, Saquon Barkley 2, Joe Burrow 3, Lamar Jackson 4, and Patrick Mahomes 5. So on the Friday show of Moving the Change, which is his show, this was the day after the MVP was announced, that whole thing happened, Jim Miller defended his choice. He said, quote, a lot of people loved Lamar. Certainly I voted a certain way. A lot of people didn't like their take on that, and I had my 5. Now, when he explained why he put Saquon and Burrow ahead of Jackson on his ballot, he said that the Eagles running back meant a lot to his team because of injuries and what Philly's offense went through. He said he put Burrow third on his ballot for how he ended the season despite the Bengals missing the playoffs. And also, the note here of the 50 voters, Jim Miller was the only one not to have Lamar Jackson in his top 2. He also said, I sleep very good with how I voted. A lot of people didn't like it because Lamar is quite a player. And then he added that even if I voted for Lamar, Josh still would have won it. That's not a good reason, Q, in my opinion. Oh, just because I didn't vote for Lamar, Josh still would have won the award. Look, Saquon had a great season. He was incredible, and he deserved his championship alongside his Philadelphia Eagles teammate. Joe Burrow had a great year as well. The defense obviously let Cincinnati down. But when we're talking about Lamar Jackson, this was a historic season. Lamar's best of his career, one of the best quarterback seasons we've seen. 41 passing touchdowns, 45 total, 4 interceptions, 4,000 passing yards, 900 rushing yards, record after record being broken. A lot of good players had great seasons this season. But it just feels like it's so like, you understand people who vote for Josh Allen. Like, there was a case there, just like there was a case for Lamar. I personally believe Lamar's case was stronger, and I know, Q, we've had that conversation, you and I. But Joe Burrow, there's all this conversation, like a big thing that deterred people from voting for Lamar was that the Bills were the higher seed over Baltimore. Well, the Bengals didn't even make the playoffs. And we're here talking about Joe Burrow. It's like, oh, well, where's that standard coming in where Lamar can be the 3 seed, but then Joe Burrow can't make the playoffs? And then for Saquon, I know, Q, there's this whole conversation about it being a quarterback award. And so, running backs, wide receivers, defensive players, whatnot, they might not get the full weight of voters in that award. But regardless, I understand Lamar Jackson won, Josh Allen 2 ballots. I understand Josh Allen won, Lamar Jackson 2 ballots. I don't understand anything else, including putting Lamar 4th.
All that is really fascinating to me when it comes to the voting, when it comes to people's opinions on who should actually be the winner of this league MVP award. And, it's interesting because I know some guys, they even went to the semantics of, well, Lamar, he's had a better surrounding cast. And, I sit back and I struggle even with that one, because now you're looking at, historically, Steve Young, who's won it with, an all-time great in Jerry Rice, Ricky Waters being on a team as well. Like, he had a strong surrounding cast. Does that mean that Steve Young should not have done it? Or heck, how about Kurt Warner? Kurt Warner technically had like Hall of Famers galore by his side in the greatest show on turf. But yet somehow, that gets overlooked. I don't know what the bias situation is with Lamar Jackson. It really is confusing. But I think the bigger picture, when you talk about even 4th place in the voting, I know Jim Miller. I've been on his show before. Like, the guy knows his stuff. He sees the game, the completeness of the game, but it's befuddling to me that he would put Lamar Jackson. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say one is the obvious, maybe two, but that's it. Like there is no third, there is no fourth. Like it's Lamar, period, my opinion. But if you want to quibble and try to force even Josh Allen into the equation, Josh has a strong argument, but that's it. Like this idea that, Lamar, what is that? What is that pause? What is it that you're not seeing on the field? It's amazing to me how he is just such more of a complete dual threat quarterback, like just slinging the ball around, strategically running, creating lanes for his other players to thrive, a la Derrick Henry. Doesn't have this dominant offensive line. He has a good, strong offensive line, don't get me wrong, but he makes everyone around him better. And that's where I think the disconnect for me comes in when you see a guy like a Jim Miller or a Dan Orlovsky, Acho, who I don't know why he even has a vote, but like it's like it's a head scratcher to me what these guys are really truly seeing. I'd love to kind of, I know they're explaining it, but I love to sit there and watch the game and see in real time, like, you don't think that's special what Lamar just did, and yet you think other guys, what they're doing is greater than what Lamar did, but they can't do what Lamar does. Doesn't make sense.
Q, you remember Peyton Manning in 2013, just an absolute dominant year, and he started that off by absolutely torching the Ravens during that whole week one situation. Yeah. Peyton Manning had 55 touchdowns that season, threw for almost 5,500 yards. He broke the single season touchdown record, single season passing yard record with those numbers. Jim Miller was the only one to not vote for Peyton Manning that year. He voted for Tom Brady. Peyton Manning got all of the votes. Jim Miller was the one that prevented Peyton Manning from winning an MVP, or that MVP at least, unanimously. So this is not the first time that Jim Miller has been in controversial hot water with his MVP vote. And clearly, look, those guys, they can vote however they want for the MVP, right? It's their vote. They can do what they want with it. But I think it does bring up a bigger conversation of who has the votes. Is there a criteria for who gets a vote? Like, I don't know if that's ever been publicly released about what it takes to actually get a vote. Do you have to have played? Do you have to have had a certain number of years in media? Like, what does that look like? But I know that, Q, it's not a conversation about Allen winning or Lamar losing or any of that. It's just about, like, you have former players publicly calling for Jim Miller to have his vote taken away. You have the NFL world publicly calling for Jim Miller to have his vote taken away, because I think when we are all watching what we're watching with Lamar, Saquon's a great player, Joe Burrow's a great player, Josh Allen's a great player, Lamar Jackson's a great player, but there are obviously certain ways you can rank guys. Some of that is up to opinion if it's really close. But for Lamar, it feels like Josh and Lamar are in a conversation and then the other guys are in a different.
Yeah, I mean, even if, Saquon is in the conversation because he was about to break the all-time rushing record for single season. I mean, he deserves to be in the conversation, but he put Joe Burrow ahead of Lamar.
Yep.
No. I mean, no. Like, I get Joe had a great year, but he didn't have the year Lamar had. Lamar had a historic year. So unless there's another Joe Burrow that did something that we don't know, Lamar had an historic year. That's why Saquon's in the conversation, because he had a historic year. And Josh Allen had a career year too for himself. That put him in the conversation. But Lamar's historic year, I think, trumps everybody else's year. To put Joe Burrow ahead of Lamar, like, and Lamar even head to head, like, they swept them. Like, what is it that we're not seeing? I'm confused, I guess.
Yeah, once again, if you're going to use the playoff argument for Lamar and the seeding, you got to use it for Joe Burrow. If you're going to use the stats argument for Lamar and Josh Allen, you got to use it for Joe Burrow. It's just like some of that conversation, it befuddles me. But regardless, Allen wins the award. Lamar finishes second. Lamar has 2. Josh Allen now has 1. Coming up in the second part of the show, we're diving into some final Ravens Super Bowl takeaways from that Eagles and Chiefs game. Q and I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. We're going to dive into it in more detail coming up next on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can run up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. The best part, PrizePicks is quick and easy. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and they're fast and secure withdrawals mean I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love their weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even better value. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Let's go LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We are back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still talking with you here on this Tuesday. Offseason officially beginning in the NFL, the Super Bowl being over. Free agency queue is a month from today. That's when the tampering period starts. And we'll, of course, be breaking down some targets for Baltimore, who's going to stay, who's going to go. We've had some of those preliminary conversations already, but I think that the Eagles showed us a blueprint that the Ravens should follow, or at least try to follow, to get to where they want to go. And that is in the pass rushing department. Philadelphia had 6 sacks in this game, and a stat that I want to pull up from the game in general, and this to me is just absolutely unreal. Seth Walder of ESPN. The Eagles blitz Patrick Mahomes on zero of his 42 dropbacks. Mahomes is the 6th quarterback in Super Bowl history to not be blitzed a single time. All 6 quarterbacks lost. It's one thing, Q, to manufacture pressure. It's one thing to blitz guys and force that quarterback to get the ball out quickly. It's another thing that your defensive line is so good and so dominant from the stars to the depth that you can only send 4 on plays. You don't have the blitz on plays, and you win in a second and already in Patrick Mahomes' face. This is the most rattled I've ever seen Patrick Mahomes in a game. Even that Tampa Super Bowl, this was worse than that. The Eagles dominated from start to finish, and I think for the Ravens, like you and I talked about at the beginning there, getting a dominant pass rusher should be at the top of this team's priority list, because with the way the secondary bounced back, the way that we saw guys like Marlon, Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Darius Washington, Nate Wiggins play, you pair a deadly pass rusher, even just one, with the current group the Ravens have, and I think that's game over for what this defense can be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think if you can get to the quarterback, any quarterback, in this particular case, AFC, you're looking at your division and obviously the Joe Burrows and whomever's going to be in Cleveland, whomever's going to be in Pittsburgh. But you also look at your schedule and you realize that, pressure bursts pipes. You can't throw in rhythm. You can't sit there and extend the play if you're not able to continue to look down the field and you got pressure coming in your face. I just was not in shock because we saw it up close and personal when Philly came to the vault and played against the Ravens. It was a scenario where you did see that defensive front really get after the offensive line for the Ravens. But what they did in the Super Bowl, that was incredible. I think, the Jalen Carters of the world, heck, Brandon Graham, he was probably like, yes, I'm going out on top, because he thought his season was over with the, I think it was a bicep tear, either bicep or tricep, but regardless, he got up in there. He was actually putting pressure on him as well. Sweat got a chance to get up in there as well. And just that entire defensive front, 4 guys, you're dropping back 7, you're sitting there, you're covering underneath zones, and then you got guys deep, so you're not necessarily worrying about getting run by, and Patrick Mahomes can't ad-lib. They nullify by the fact that they have guys in those underneath zones. They nullify Travis Kelce to pretty much doing nothing. And that is just perfect. When it comes to Philadelphia saying, how do we need to stop him? We're going to rush for We're going to let our 4 take care of them. And they did just that.
They did. And I think that the conversation of where the Ravens are, Q, I know we had this conversation last week, you and I, when we talked about Myles Garrett, but it's like Odafe Oweh had a great year last year, double-digit sacks. I think we saw growth in him, and that's great. Calvin Noy has been an absolute steal on his contract. He has revived his career in Baltimore and has been a really, really good player for them over the course of his 2 years. But those guys aren't Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons or, any of the top TJ Watt, any of these guys. And while I'm not saying the Ravens can just snap their fingers and get one of those guys to Baltimore, I do think that they have to look into that, because it almost would be like if Oweh becomes your number 2 instead of the number 1. I think a lot of fans will feel more confident in that. Now, what's Oweh's ceiling? I don't know what Oweh's ceiling is. I think he still has room to grow, but it's his 5th-year option coming up this year. He'll be eligible for an extension after next year. Is he going to take enough of a leap to reward him with probably a big money? Because if he stays in double-digit sack territory, he's going to get paid. So it's like, do you want to go in the Oweh basket? But outside of Van Noy and Oweh, Tavius Robinson is a great run defender. Tavius Robinson, I'm just putting on record now, I'm stealing your guy here. He's my breakout pick for the Ravens next year because of what we saw from him as a run defender. As a pass rusher, I think he can make an impact, but we're going to have to see how he goes there. But after that, you can't put your eggs in the David Ojabo basket anymore, at least not to the point you can trust him in a role. These Isaac could step up, but for a contending team, how many could step up players do you want, and how many actual guys that are the guy do you want there? And on the other side, for the offensive line, Q, I think we saw for Kansas City just how bad of a performance it was. And part of that was because the Eagles' defensive line was just so dominant, and the Chiefs had to deal with some things up there, moving guys out of position. But the Ravens have to hit this offensive line retooling out of the park. You have a couple of foundational building blocks there in Tyler Linderbaum and Roger Rosengarten. We don't know if Ronnie Stanley will be back. The guard position certainly has some room for improvement with McCary and Daniel Falele there. They have to invest in the trenches. This is the biggest thing I took away from this game, because we saw one team win the Super Bowl in the trenches. One team lost the Super Bowl in the trenches. You have to have it right there, because it all starts up front for an offense, and it all starts up front for a defense too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just obvious football for those that really kind of get into the weeds of it. And that's what we are doing right now. How do you continue to be better? You got to be better up front. Everything starts up front. All those teams that have made the playoffs, they had some good up front guys. The teams that kept on advancing, they had better up front guys. And the team that hoisted up that Lombardi had the best up front on the defense side of the ball, and even offensively. I mean, you're rushing for, the amount that you're rushing for, and you're getting the NFC Championship game, was it 7 touchdowns or rushing touchdowns? Like that's just dominating up front. So offensively, defensively, everything that you do, it spreads from there. When you have a strong offensive line, it sets the tone for everything. It gives you ball control, it gives you quarterback protection, gives you a chance to make big plays down the football field. We saw that with the Eagles and the way they were able to make plays down the football field because Jalen Hurts had time to get into a rhythm and do his thing. There was so much concentration on trying to stop Saquon, but Saquon had like key moments in the game. It wasn't like he had those big explosive runs, but he had the key moment runs that he needed. We saw Jalen Hurts do his thing as far as running the football as well. That was really important. The larger picture is, from a Odafe Oweh standpoint, is he a guy that commands a double team or back chipping him out of the backfield? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't see it. I think, there are times when he's one-on-one. He's absolutely, you should get those double-digit sacks. Is it scheme or is it just talent when it comes to whether it be Kyle Van Noy, whether it be Adisa Isaac, whether it be, even Robinson, TR, like for him, Tavius is a guy that, yes, can stop the run, but there are times where, he got to the quarterback. But it's that guy that is just constantly putting pressure in a quarterback's face that's something that I'd love to see more often against the upper tier teams that the Ravens face throughout the year.
Yeah, and I do want to put it on record just so that we do talk about it, that it goes beyond the edge rusher room too. Like obviously the guys in the middle there, the defensive line with Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, Michael Pierce, etc. Like those are all because you talked about it, like Jalen Carter, and I know Jordan Davis is another guy there. Like it's not just the edge guys that get that. Yeah, those guys don't. It's not just the edge guys. So Nnamdi Madubuike, and he got double teamed a lot this year, by the way. So I know people might look at Nnamdi's year and say, oh, that was a down year considering what happened last season. It was just, well, teams took notice that Nnamdi's really good and they tried to make sure that he was not a factor. But when that happens, other guys have to win their one-on-ones and win them consistently when they're sending two on somebody. So whether that is Travis Jones, Michael Pierce, whoever, Project Washington, or maybe they go get somebody else. They can get somebody in the draft that they could put up there. So they're going to have to figure that whole thing out.
But to interject that's where, again, with the Eagles, like, okay, who are you going to double? Like, that's the cool part, because, oh, man, you're going to win your one-on-one. The Nnamdi factor, the Broderick Washingtons of the world, you got paid, but, now you're in question as far as your production. The Travis Jones, like, oh, he's going to break out. Man, he's big, he's strong, he's athletic. Oh, man, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, like the production needs to be with the height.
Definitely. I mean, everybody has to work in unison. Everybody has to work together. And so if one guy's getting doubled, other guys have to work it out. But, if you have multiple guys that command a double team, you can't throw all that power there. And I think that is the problem that we want the Ravens to have here is like you want to have enough guys that command a double team to where the offensive line doesn't know what to do, because if you don't double team them, they're going to just obliterate their one-on-one matchup consistently. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about a name that could potentially be that guy for the Ravens. Maybe the team he's on looks to trade him. We'll talk about another trade target and some comments from Rashad Bateman. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here, Qadry Ismail, Kevin Oestreicher, talking Ravens football on this Taco Tuesday. And Q, I'm going to give you two names because two names over the weekend were in trade discussions. One was he seek permission or he seeked a trade. He requested a trade and his team said, okay, you know what? You and your agent, you can go and look at a trade. Another guy, there have been rumors that maybe he's going to be available. Maybe the team he's on to look to trade him. Micah Parsons, Dallas Cowboys, is the one that maybe he'll be available. And this is a different position than next guy. But Deebo Samuel over in San Francisco, who I know you and I have talked about before, he requested a trade last offseason, or, he requested a trade before and ended up signing an extension. Now he is more in the boat of, okay, I just kind of want out of here. And San Francisco's like, okay. So Micah Parsons versus Deebo Samuel. I think I know where you're going to go here. But Micah Parsons versus Deebo Samuel, who would you want more in the Ravens and why? And why would you not want the other person on the Ravens more?
Yeah, I think the obvious answer is Micah Parsons. The why not Deebo Samuels. I think Deebo is incredibly talented. He would be that Anquan Bolden player where you can just put him, whether it be the X by himself, the Z, or you can put him in the slot. He's going to win. Physical, tough, yards at the catch. Obviously, the way in which they utilized him in San Fran, as far as being a de facto running back at times, and just ultimate dual threat receiver, running back type player. Really just fascinating talent. I think, though, when it comes to a lot of the hits and things that he's taken over the years, you could see where, that's that's concerning, especially when you got a group that is a young group when it comes to their receiver room. But yeah, he's no question. Micah Parsons, I think, again, we're talking about a hunter, a guy that can play across the line, doesn't matter his position, match them up against, your lesser offensive lineman. I think Micah Parsons would be a better fit for what the Ravens like to do. I can imagine him and Roquan kind of lined up on the same side and Kyle Hamilton on that side. Or you can have Kyle kind of coming over to the weak side. Now, who are you going to defend? Like, who are you going to go after? You just have so many different options. I remember they would line up Terrell Suggs and a Haloti Ngata and then overload the other side of the offensive line. And it's like, oh, my God. If you fan everybody to the overloaded side, you're leaving two guys who were finalists and talked about for the Hall of Fame. You're leaving them by themselves one-on-one with your lesser offensive lineman. What are you going to do? So that is where I would see a Micah Parsons fit into what the Ravens could do. And again, I mean, he's versatile. So it's not like he's like one-dimensional. That dude got some versatility to his game. I think both guys are phenomenal players, but give me Micah Parsons.
Yep, I'm with you 100%. That's not even getting into the cap situation with Debo, which could become a bit complicated if San Fran doesn't pay his roster bonus. And Cowboys are a pretty unpredictable team. So who knows what's going on over there in Dallas right now. But Rashad Bateman had some comments, and I talked about this on yesterday's show, but I do want to get your thoughts on it here, Q. He was at Radio Row, and he talked over at SiriusXM, and Fantasy Life put this quote out. Rashad Bateman, when asked about the Chiefs, he said, who you want to win, Rashad, Chiefs or Eagles? He said the Eagles. And he said, quote, I just don't have respect for them anymore. I think we all see why some stuff just goes too far and it affects other people, affects other people's lives, it affects people's outcomes. I don't really like that. So pretty strong words. And I think the Rashad, you might be saying the quiet part out loud for a lot of players in the league who are just like, man, we're getting tired of this. Like, can it be someone else? Can it be something else other than Kansas City? What were your thoughts when you heard that? Because those are pretty decently strong comments.
Yeah, they're strong. And I think for Rashad, yes, there is that, wait a minute, what are we doing here? There's always this favorable call that's a questionable call that's going Kansas City Chiefs' way. And, yeah, you work just as hard, but now there's this double standard. What gives NFL globally, bigger picture. And so I think that's the vocal voice that guys are, screaming loud from the mountaintops. But unfortunately, it seemed like it was falling on deaf ears.
I know that some people look at the Chiefs' loss and they say, hey, look, this might be a changing of the guard type deal. I'm not willing to go that far yet, but the Chiefs certainly have some work to do because the uncertain future of Travis Kelce, and they're going to get Rashee Rice back, and that'll be big for them. I do think with Kansas City, though, until a team can prove they can beat them in the AFC, it is still the Chiefs conference, just a matter of when that ends up happening. But Q, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for hopping on, joining me here again on the show. As always, I know you're busy with missile training. You got the merch on, you got the thing in the background. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, man, it is. It's missiletraining.com. Missiletraining.com is where you can reach out to me and see what it is as far as movement and human movement and sports performance training is all about. At the same time, go ahead and shoot me a message, and I'd love to interact with you to see if it's a good fit for you. The age ranges, people ask, I'm like, man, it's from 6 all the way up to 85. And yes, I do team training as well. Girls, boys, men, women, doesn't matter. We get it done, missiletraining.com. And of course, off season, it's WJZ, where my purple shows, they continue on. You can check me out on WJZ, but Locked On Ravens is where I'm at each and every week. My guy, Kevin Oestreicher, and I, we break it down. Check us out, follow us. And then, of course, you can see us on social media. Sometimes we'll go ahead and say something that is rather controversy to the uninitiated. But if you look deep, you're like, well, they make sense. So it's not as controversial if I could just put on my listening ears and understand the bigger picture.
It is the beauty of social media is having the ability to agree or disagree and then have conversations about it, understand opinions, and just go the whole 9 yards with it. So, of course, we always put our opinions out here on full display on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to check out Q over at Missile Training. That'll all be in the description down below as always. Q, I appreciate you, and I appreciate everybody who tuned in and listened and watched today to Locked On Ravens. On the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage, even in the offseason, which means tomorrow I'll be right back here talking Ravens football. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.